My name is Richard Harland, and I will be introducing things tonight. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, and welcome to the Basic Science Lights the Way series. Tonight, we have the pleasure of hearing from three paleontologists about their research on the prehistoric flora and fauna of California. California, as we know, is a land of breathtaking beauty and biodiversity. But under its vibrant surface lies a rich tapestry of ancient flora and fauna that shaped the landscape long before humans arrived. California was once inhabited by extraordinary animals that roamed its plains and forests. The region was teeming with charismatic megafauna, including woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats. And wouldn't we like to see those here again? These formidable creatures adapted to diverse habitats from the coastal regions to the arid deserts. Their fossils, unearthed in various locations, tell a story of evolution and extinction, influenced by changing climates and the arrival of human populations. All of our speakers this evening are researchers in the University of California Museum of Paleontology here at Berkeley. The museum's mission is to promote the understanding of the history of life and the diversity of the Earth's biota through research, education, and outreach. It's one of the country's major research museums, housing one of the largest paleontology collections of any university museum in the world. Some of the most significant research coming from the UC Museum of Paleontology includes studies on the evolutionary history of early mammals, particularly their rapid spread following the dinosaur extinction. Also, research on the impact of mass extinctions on ecosystems, investigations into the fossil record of kelp and kelp ecosystems, and analysis of fossils from the La Brea tar pits, providing insights into past environments and species interactions across various geological eras. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator this evening. Lisa White is a geologist and the Director of Education and Outreach at the University of California Museum of Paleontology here on the Berkeley campus. Lisa is a former professor of geosciences and Associate Dean of the College of Science and Engineering at San Francisco State University. As chair of the American Geophysical Union Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, Lisa works to create a culture that embraces diversity and inclusiveness in the earth and space sciences. As the education director at the museum, she develops and disseminates learning materials on evolution and the fossil record, virtual geological field trip experiences, and the nature and process of science. Thank you for being here this evening as our moderator, Lisa. I'll be in touch with you later to borrow some fossils to play with. And over to you.
Thank you, Richard. I'm excited to be here tonight. My work with the museum focuses on communicating science research and scientific concepts to educators, students, and the public, much like our guests that are joining us tonight. I'm certainly passionate about science education and outreach, and I've spent some of the best years of my career engaging in field and laboratory experiences, and with the goal really of generating interest and excitement in the geosciences. While our collections here at the UCMP are very impressive, the museum is normally closed to the public with some few exceptions. So talks like this are such a great way to get a rare glimpse into the research and teaching that we do at the museum. Researchers in our world-class museum work in the field and in all sorts of pioneering labs to really drive breakthroughs in the natural sciences. From the bottom of the ocean to the crowns of the tallest trees, we certainly study organisms across the entire tree of life to achieve an integrative understanding of what makes us who we are in this web of life and what sustains us. Now, the format tonight, at the end of each talk, we will try to address all the questions that we can, given the time, from the audience. So please add questions to the chat throughout each talk. And I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker for this evening. She is an assistant curator in the UC Museum of Paleontology, and she's an adjunct assistant professor in the Department of Integrative Biology, Dr. Juan Liu. In Dr. Liu's lab, lovingly called Fish and More, or the FAM lab, students and associates conduct research and outreach activities related to the understanding of deep time evolutionary histories of fish and their relatives, as well as the functional anatomy and evolution of auditory systems in fish. The FAM lab conducts field work all over the world, from the Anderson River Valley in the Canadian Arctic to Red Rock Canyon in California. Dr. Liu is the namesake of a fossil that she discovered while in graduate school in Tibet. So its name, Apiocricetus luei, after her, translates roughly to high hamster, as she discovered it in the highlands of Tibet. So Juan, we really are excited that you're joining us this evening. So can you share some of your research with us, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for the very nice introduction. I'm very excited to be here as well. So tonight, I'm going to show you some of very Californian stuff. So as you can see from my title slides, I'm going to talk about California paleoichthyology. Paleo means ancient, ichthyology means the study of fish. So you can guess I'm going to talk about fish, all those swimming things in the past. So this is also a course, a direct field course I'm teaching this semester. So in this course, I'm taking students to fossil localities to do fossil prospecting and also go over some of geological events in the past. But what's interesting about California paleoichthyology is you cannot run through all of them in one season or in one semester for your students. So as you might have heard, a common term says the age of fish is commonly referred to the Paleozoic, which is a very old time. In this segment, as you can see, it's 250 million years ago until about 500 million years ago. So this time period has been called Age of Fish because back then a lot of revolutionary evolution event has occurred. For example, getting a hat. You know, we all have a hat. We don't feel that's a big deal. But back then, for the first fish, aka the first vertebrates who get a hat, so many benefits coming with a hat. The brain will come in, the enlarged neural tubes, the cranial nerves, which enable our spatial sense for smell, for vision, for listening, and for balance. Those all occur with the appearance of head. And those were like a really wonderland for many ancient fish, something like these ones. These are jawless fish. You know, whatever we can see in the past, a lot of them we don't see in nowadays anymore, like this kind of a trident shape. So even though they don't have a jaw, all of these are jawless fish. They really rely on passive feeding. However, they had their chance to diversify it, and they were not alone. Back then, jaw also evolved. With the evolution of jaw, with the active hunting or feeding mechanisms, vertebrates went through so many revolutionary changes. However, you know, what makes a fish famous for that age does not make fish stop there. In the Mesozoic era, we all know that's the age of dinosaurs, but did you know fish tremendously diversified back then? As you can see in this reconstructional figure from Santana Formation of Brazil, while the pterosaur was flying in the sky and the dinosaur and crocodiles were soaring on the land, a bunch of fishes and sometimes really giant fishes are swimming in a lake, in the ocean, and sometimes in the giant river. But do they stop there? Of course not. There was a second wave of huge diversification at the end of Mesozoic, which was like the time all dinosaurs extinct. So past the KBG boundary in the Cenozoic, the fish has a huge wave of diversification, which bring us very modern look fishes. For example, all these reef fishes from Monte Boca, whatever we can see, like this kind of angelfish shape and any other fishes. So what we can see from the reef today, we might find a representation in the past. And what's interesting is something we don't have it today anymore. We still can find the traits from the fossil localities. So what I want to tell you is the age of fish is true, but the following ages, the following two era, we can also consider to be the age of fishes. And what's unique or interesting about California is that we have representations for all this era. I'm going to show you the first one, which is from a fossil locality in Death Valley. You know, we're in the Bay Area. If we go all the way south, get to the desert area, and when you see all those different color of rocks which being crushed or being folded, and sometimes they have a small outcrop of sediments. That's where we saw very old fishes. This age is called early Devonian, roughly 350 million years ago. Given that age, you can expect you might be able to find some jawless fishes. The answer is yes, we did see some jawless fishes from that segment, from that sedimentary. So this group, a clade of fish from that is called heterostrachan. Literally means different shell because the shell enclosed the body has been in various sizes. But, you know, what's different from that's not all. From the same locality, there were also advanced fishes. It's called jawed fishes, Acansodian. This group of fish has been really in debate. Should they be spiny sharks or should they be thorny bony fish? As you know, these are like two major fishes group. The recent research has been demonstrated some of the Acansodian might be close to spiny sharks, so they might be shark relatives. As one of the things you can see similar to shark is they are really spiny things here. All right, in the Mesozoic, you know, California don't really have Californian dinosaurs. Instead, we have a bunch of California mosasaur and ichthyosaurs, including the giant slab in the BSB. That wasn't not California, but we do have a similar size ichthyosaur. So fishes has been collected in those sites. Some of them, like this one, clear is a predator. It's a big tooth. It's only a single tooth here, but you can see this is born for biting. And a shark tooth from the Chico Formation down south is a very ancient shark that has been extinct at the end of Mesozoic. So really back then, a bunch of fish occurred and they, if not being eaten by the mosasaur or ichthyosaur, they might also join the hunting because Mesozoic is the time a lot of bony fish get humongous. For example, the Xiphanus from the western interior sea. Now it gets to the Cenozoic. What's interesting about this? It's really numerous. You know, a lot of information we learn or we know about the Cenozoic fossil sites are actually from our citizen scientists. There is one MCB professor told me they have like a little creek run through their community, and they felt like there were fossils there. I haven't got a chance to visit that site yet, but I will be very excited to discover new sites just within the communities. All right, so really quickly to highlight two formations from these time segments. The first one is a Monterey Formation. It's the red shaded area along the coast. The other one called the Prisma Formation, which is the gray shaded area in the central or Bay Area, down south to the Santa Cruz and north to the Point Reyes. I'm taking a class to the Point Reyes next week is to look for some of the fishes. So as you can see, all these segments are exposed along the coast, which means you might have a chance to prospect fossils at a really beautiful beach. And that is true. This was a class in 2022 I took to Capitola. And besides whale bones and fish tooths, there were also shark remains. So this was from one of the trip, not exactly this one, but one of the trip. One of our students found a thick gill shark tooth down there. It's like jiggly saw. And this area has been reported with a giant megalodon shark. This shark tooth was like my hand size. All right. I think I'm running out of my time. So this is ongoing research. Unfortunately, I have to skip. But what I want to say most to all of you is California fish locality or the paleontology is unique. You know, this state is a biodiversity spot in nowadays, but it was also about diversity hotspot in the past. As you can see from every era, we have really good representations. And those representations we can connect with the world. For example, the fish from San Joaquin, I didn't get into the detail, was really hyperostosis bones. That's the same bone, same appearance we have seen in Tibetan Plateau. However, I think they have a different mechanism to enlarge their bones, which I will be excited to share with you once we have confirmed answers. And for the Devonian stuff, the Death Valley one appeared to be one of the early divergence events for jawless fish and early jawed fishes. Similar deposits I have seen, I have visited is from the Arctic region, which is all the way north. Took some time to get there, but it's a really fun area because along the river running to the Arctic Ocean, the river cutting through a riverbank exposed the really old sediments, like the early Devonian sediments. We have seen similar stuff that's the same as the Death Valley specimens, for example, the jawless fish, Acanthodians. But what else is that we find really early tetrapodomorph relatives, which means some lineages might give rise the vertebrates has legs instead of fins. All right, I think that's what I want to say now, but I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you, Juan. We really appreciate your presentation. We're running a little short on time. There is a question in the chat about earliest humans in the Americas and in California, and of course that's much, much after the periods of time you were talking about. So we can perhaps address it at the end of
Okay.
of everyone's
Sure.
presentation, and I think going on to the next speaker would help us stay on track. But thank you so much for that.
Very welcome.
Great. So our next speaker for the evening is Associate Professor Jack Tseng. He's the principal investigator of the Functional Anatomy and Vertebrate Evolution Laboratory, FAVE, and he's also a curator at the UC Museum of Paleontology. So Dr. Tseng's work and his research interests are in the evolution of mammals and the engineering of their musculoskeletal systems. So projects in his lab include analysis of variables such as diet, evolutionary relationships, and ecological traits, and their interplay on the structure and function of the skull and skeleton. So his lab has made recent headlines with his research, particularly into the teeth of California's saber-toothed cat, which we'll learn about this evening. So Jack, welcome and thank you, and we look forward to hearing about your work.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to share some of my recent discoveries with you. And as Lisa said, I'm a terrestrial specialist. I work with land mammals, and particularly among the rarest of them, the top predators. So today I want to just highlight a few key discoveries going from northern to southern California to really show you perhaps some unexpected presence of these predators from long ago. And we are living in a dynamic, very dynamic part of Earth. And this was true not only today, with our earthquakes and ever-changing weather, but we also know that in the geologic history of California, there has been quite a lot of changes. And this really dynamic and ever-changing geologic history really provided the backdrop to a very dynamic fossil history, paleontological history that we are fortunate to study. And what you're seeing on the screen here is a time lapse. You may be seeing continents, the green parts moving here and there, and the coastline changing in and out of that red area outlined as how California looks today. And this is a look through time from about 300 million years ago to the present day. And one of the things that some of us, if you just stare at the California part of the video, can pick up is that California has been the best coast for at least 300 million years. And the coast line has moved inward and outward with time. And the video ended with the modern topography of California, which is where our coasts are today. But in the past, there are some older rocks, terrestrial rocks, that preserve predators really at a crossroads on their migration route, sometimes from Europe, from Asia, and even from South America. So today, the fossils want to highlight represent some of those dispersal or immigration events. But before we get there, and hopefully through Lisa's introduction and Jen's presentation, you're starting to get an appreciation for just how much information, scientific and cultural and historical, California preserves as a state. And in particular, we are fortunate enough to be working for the Museum of Paleontology. It's almost every kid's dream to be a paleontologist, but we're actually living that dream. And part of our very important mission is not only to discover and understand past life on Earth, but also to pass on that knowledge, to disseminate all the science that we know about the past, California's past, with the general audience. So part of my work is also going down to especially the Southern California desert to teach school kids, my students, as well as teachers in primary schools about the fossil treasures that we have right here in our state. So from some of those efforts going out both on my own with my team as well as students, we have discovered over the past decade or so a series of very interesting predators that are mostly no longer alive today. And the first one of these I want to highlight today is a saber tooth, but this is not the same saber tooth that are found in the tar pits that Emily will talk about right after me. But this is a saber tooth that was found at two sites, both near Mount Diablo, just east of Berkeley, as well as in the Western Mojave Desert, just a couple hours north of LA. And this particular saber tooth is known by a handful of teeth. And we know it's a saber tooth because of its relatively elongate canine that is preserved with other cat-looking teeth. It's a critter called Barbarophilus, or barber's cat. And how this is different from the Southern California saber-tooth is the fact that it has a very large flange that perhaps served as a protective sheath for its very long upper sabers. So this is one of the cool critters that we find in Northern California. And if we move down, halfway down the state, if you've ever driven on the I-5, this is close to the Coalinga rest stop, where some of us like to stop after driving for 3.5 hours to stretch our legs. Just a couple of miles west of that rest stop lies rocks that are approximately 15 million years old. And this is one of the skulls that came out of a mitigation project. Essentially, there was construction going on in the area, and they unearthed this and other fossils. And this particular fossil is thought to be a beach version of a wolverine or very large weasel that apparently today we no longer have in Central Valley. Going further south, now we're getting close to the Santa Barbara County, Ventura counties. This is a very active area, geologically speaking. The red line on the graph here shows how close these yellow circles, fossil localities, are to the San Andreas Fault. So it's very tectonically active. And from this area, we've recently discovered and described a raccoon-like relative of top predators, again, that are no longer living in the area today. But based on even just a few teeth, we can extract enough information to know that this particular critter lived not too far from a really earthquake-prone area about 10 to 15 million years ago. And I would like to wrap up, of course, with one of the most recent research papers that I published, and this is on the quintessential California state fossil, Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat. In particular, my recent study looked at how the sabers of these cats would have moved or would have worked from an engineering perspective when they grew out. And to do this, we ran a series of computer models using beam theory, which is often what's used in construction and engineering. And we found that, as these sabers grew, their bending strength tend to plateau and sort of stay at this gray line level. And this is much less than the theoretical optimum that you would predict from engineering theory. But if we were to add on a particular time period during the saber-toothed life where they actually had two sets of sabers on each side, and this happens when their milk teeth or baby teeth are on their way out and their permanent teeth are coming in, there's about a time period of 18 months. And this is a critical period for these teenage saber-tooth that are trying to really hone their hunting skills. And what we see is that, with two sets of teeth, they can actually elevate their entire profile of bending strength and actually meet a theoretical optimum that they otherwise couldn't meet with a single tooth. So this is thought to be an additional adaptation that these saber-tooth had to deal with the fact that they had essentially mouth knives they needed to protect from overbending during hunting. And I'm going to wrap up there, and if we have time, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thanks for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Jack. That was great. And there is a question in the chat about the collection we have in the Campanile. So how much are you or students in your lab utilizing that collection?
Yes, so there is actually one of the earliest collections of the tar pits discoveries right up in the bell tower on campus, the Campanile. And yeah, some of the saber-tooth fossils we have used in an earlier study looking at the rate of eruption of the sabers, because for such a long tooth, you might imagine either they have to just spend a long time growing them or actually just pop them out faster So we used some of those specimens in the Campanile, and we actually extracted carbon and oxygen elemental signatures from them to figure out that these sabers were growing at twice the rate as a typical mammal tooth. So definitely, even after over a century since their discovery, these fossils are still giving us new information about how these animals lived. Thank you for the question.
That's great. And we have time for a couple more. As you'll see, they are coming fast and furious in the chat if you'd like to address any of them.
Yeah, so I think most of them are about saber-tooth. So I can describe sort of generally about what the current state of knowledge is regarding how the sabers were used. The short answer is nobody has a really great hypothesis. I mean, we all have hypotheses, but it's not really well demonstrated because unfortunately these predators are entirely extinct. So we really don't have behavior that's preserved in the fossil record. However, using these engineering techniques, we can at least start to paint a picture of a set of teeth that probably would not have been used to hold on to prey very tightly, like modern lions and tigers do. But instead, they would have had to deliver potentially precise and surgical strikes to key areas. Maybe areas with shallow blood vessels that would lead to blood loss, so that the prey will be immobilized from blood loss rather than from the pure might of the saber-tooth. However, as you will hear from Emily very soon, there perhaps is another part of the skeleton that should be considered part of the story, and I would not reveal any more of that. I would just let Emily tell that story of the potential sort of protection and use of the sabers from other parts of the body.
Great. So we're okay on time. Any one last question you'd like to ask from the chat before we go to Emily?
I mean, I could also touch a bit on the flange. There's a question about saber-tooth with the flanges. And some saber-tooth, not the California saber-tooth, not Smilodon, but other saber-tooth, for example, Barbariophilas, the Northern California one, had a bony flange that has been used by paleo artists to reconstruct a very large chin. And the very recent, I mean, this is literally, late last week, a new discovery coming out of Siberia, not with my team, but with some Russian colleagues who discovered the first mummy of a baby saber-tooth. And they've shown that, even before the bony flange grew in and the baby saber-tooth, there was actually a big, almost like a beard or long elongated fur that sort of formed the appearance of a flange. So there's still, a lot to be learned. Every time we find something, especially with soft tissue, we find surprises, that we didn't know before just from looking at the bones.
Great. Thank you so much. And your talk, of course, is a perfect segue to your graduate students' talk. And everyone, let's all thank Jack, and we'll move on to our third speaker, who is a fifth-year PhD candidate in Jack's lab. She conducts research on the evolutionary biomechanics and functional morphology of vertebrates. She's an affiliate of the UC Museum of Paleontology, as well as the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. And her dissertation, her is Emily Bogner, hi Emily, focuses on how the carnivoran skeleton has evolved for hunting and prey acquisition. And Emily's research has really unveiled the intricate interplay of the integrated evolution between the skull, arms, and legs, which broadens our understanding of how animals evolved to be best suited for their environments. So tonight, Emily will share with us her work from the La Brea tar pits and the carnivores found there, including the saber-toothed cat. So Emily Bogner, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you all so much for having me tonight. I'm very excited to be here. Let me just share my screen real quick. Alrighty, so as Jack and Lisa both alluded to, I'll be talking a little bit about natural tar seeps and saber-toothed cats. As Lisa mentioned, I'm a fifth-year PhD student working under Dr. Jack Tseng in the Functional Anatomy and Vertebrate Evolution Lab. And I study carnivores, and specifically the skull, arm, and leg bones of these carnivores to better understand how these extinct animals hunted and moved. And so some of the animals that I study come from natural tar seeps. And natural tar seeps, there's only about 6 actually found worldwide. And these occur when there's an underground reservoir of tar asphalt, and then there's a crack in the Earth's crust that allows this reservoir to slowly leak to the surface and kind of form a pool at the surface. And when this tar is at the surface, it can get covered in things like leaves and debris, and sometimes you're not even able to detect that it is a little tar seep or pool of it. So even though there's only 6 of these tar seeps occurring naturally worldwide, we have actually 2 of them found here in California. And so there is one just north of LA, the LA area. If you're in the Central Valley, it's at the very southern end of the Central Valley, just west of Bakersfield. And this is known as the McKittrick Tar Pits. And then south of that is the more world-renowned La Brea Tar Pits found in Los Angeles. And these both are separated by a mountain basin where if you're driving along the 5 going south, you might refer to it as the Grapevine. This mountain range separates both of them. And there are fossils found at both of these sites. And like I mentioned, it can get really easy to get stuck in this tar, and I can attest to it. I was taking a group of high schoolers around over the summer, showing them the differences between the 2 sites. And we stopped at McKittrick Tar Pits, and I got out to give a little 10-minute lecture just a couple feet from the car. And when I went to move, I was actually stuck in about a centimeter of tar, and it didn't even look like I was standing in tar because it was so covered with dust and whatnot on the surface. So true testament that these animals were really easily able to get stuck in the tar. I'm going to focus on this talk a little bit more about the La Brea tar pits, but the tar at La Brea had been used for centuries. We have documentation of indigenous communities using this tar as a way to waterproof their boats. And then later, when houses started being built in the area, it was used as a way to form kind of plugs in leaky ceilings during the rainy season. The first excavations at La Brea started in the early 1900s by researchers from UC Berkeley, but it wasn't really until about the 1913, 1915s when the biggest and most major excavations started. And during this 2-year time period, 96 pits were excavated, and more than 1 million fossils were recovered during this 2-year time period, which is an amazing feat. To give it a little bit of perspective, today, their collections hold about 3.5 million fossils. So in just a 2-year period, about 1/3 of the fossils that are currently found at La Brea were recovered during that time. And the top picture on the right side of the screen shows some of those fossils that were found. And excavations are still being done there today. But in over 100 years that we've been excavating there have been a wide variety of animals that have been found at the site. There have been birds in all types of shapes and sizes, from small songbirds up to birds of prey. There have been insects, there have been plants, bats, small mammals in the forms of rodents and rabbits, and large herbivores like mammoths and horses and camels. But most notable from La Brea are the carnivores there. The most numerous animal that has ever been found at La Brea are the dire wolves, which if you see in the lower left-hand screen, if you ever go to La Brea, they have a whole wall just of hundreds of these dire wolf skulls, which is pretty amazing. The second most common animal found at La Brea are the saber-toothed cats, and that is what I'm going to focus the rest of my talk on. So saber-toothed cats differ a little bit from modern large cats that we see today, like lions, jaguars, and tigers. First of all, they have those very charismatic canines that are very elongated and kind of almost knife-like. They're very slender and serrated. Compared to other large cats living today, they have very slender skulls. And then when you move to back behind the skull, looking at the neck and the arm and leg bones, we actually find that these bones are a little bit more robust than what we see in large cats today. And it is hypothesized that saber-toothed cats hunted similarly to extant large cats in the way that extant large cats kind of stalk their prey, pounce on their prey, and then administer a killing bite really quickly. However, the question that I was studying is, even though these two animals have very different body plans, does that mean that they could still hunt in the same way? And what we used to be able to study this question is that we used a computer simulation called finite element analysis, which was originally created by engineers to test for weak points in bridges. And how this computer simulation works is you're able to input a model or an object like a skull or an arm bone and apply forces to it and see how that force or that stress dissipates throughout your object. And so we did this for the skull and arm bone of our saber-toothed cat and 4 modern cats, a lion, a tiger, a jaguar, and a leopard. And what we found is really interesting. So if you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see some skulls and some arm bones. And the areas that have red are areas of really high strain, and the areas of blue have very low strain. And what we see is that our Smilodon had the highest strain values of any of the skulls that we tested. However, when we look at their arm bone, we see that they have the lowest strain values of any of our cats that were tested. And so what we're seeing is that we see a lot of opposite things happening right here. And what we hypothesize this to mean is that saber-toothed cats had mechanically weak skulls, but mechanically strong arms, which we hypothesize to mean that they were hunting in different ways than what we see in extant large cats. We hypothesize that the saber-toothed cats were probably using their arms a great deal during their hunting to really hold down their prey and immobilize their prey from struggling. And what this would have helped to have done is for them to administer a killing bite. So what we know is that they have these very thin sabers that were prone to breaking. We find a lot of these sabers broken in the fossil record. And what we can see, or we hypothesize, is that they were using their arms to really hold down their prey to help protect their sabers. Because you can imagine if you're holding down a prey with your mouth and it's struggling a lot, that's going to give your sabers more prone to breaking. But if you can hold your prey down really well, it's going to be less prone to breaking. And that is what we hypothesize. So as I mentioned, this is one of the chapters, the research I produced for one of the chapters of my dissertation. And I'm studying a couple other carnivore critters as well, but this is, just one of them. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Emily. That was great. And there are just a mix of things in the chat. Thank you, Jack, and Juan too for keeping up with some of the questions and answering. And one question about food sources for the saber-toothed cat. So did they indiscriminately eat any and everything that had meat, or were they particular?
Were they particular or were they not particular in what they ate? That's a very good question. So there have been studies done to determine what size animals need to eat in order to sustain themselves. And what we find is that there's actually a threshold between where some carnivores are small enough that they can sustain themselves on prey that is smaller than them. But after a certain point, after a certain body size threshold, you actually need to start eating prey that is as large as yourself or larger than yourself in order to sustain yourself and keep your body at a very healthy state. And saber-toothed cats are above this threshold. So what we know is that they were eating a lot of meat, and they were probably hunting prey that was a lot larger than they were, if not their body size. And to do this, they were most likely ambush hunters. Because they have these very robust they're very robust arms and legs, they wouldn't have been able to run fast. And we know this along with tying it with other key shape features that we see in their bones. So they wouldn't have been able to run fast. They most likely would have stalked and ambushed their prey and then did a quick, short pounce pursuit on some type of herbivore that was probably their size or larger, taking it down and killed it very quickly before eating it.
Fascinating. Well, we're doing good on time, and some other questions have popped up in the chat for you, including have human remains been found in the pits? And did some of the early hominids run with the cats, so to speak?
Yeah, that is a very great question. As of right now, only one human has ever been found in the La Brea tar pits. And I believe they did radiocarbon dating on her. It was a female who was found. And they dated her to be about 10,000 years old. And what's actually really interesting is they originally found her with a dog and they thought it was a ceremonial burial. However, then later the dog was radiocarbon dated and it ended up being much younger than the woman who was found there. So they don't think that those are associated anymore. But so yeah, there's only been one human and she was about 10,000 years old. And humans did live alongside these very big carnivores, which would have been very scary. They lived alongside the mammoths, the dire wolves, the saber-toothed cats. So it was a very different world out there. They had to have been really tough.
For sure. And as you can see, there are a lot of great questions, some related to your reconstructed models to look at the strain and if it's based on sizes and shapes of bones.
Yeah, so do we use our reconstructed models to look at the strain, or is it based on size and shape? It's a little bit of both. So based on the size and shape of the bone is going to depend on how the forces that we apply kind of dissipate through the bone a little bit. So if you have a bone that is thicker, it's going to be able to absorb some of that those applied forces a little better than if you have a bone that isn't as thick. So it depends on both a little bit. How do strain values limit the use of jaws and limbs? Jack actually did a little bit of research on this, looking at what shape of jaws are and are not possible in real life. And there are some jaws that are so slender we would never be able to get them in, see them in like biological real life because they wouldn't have really been able to hold up many forces, I believe. But so yeah, your jaws and your limbs are only as good as you can use them for. So evolution will kind of veer you to what you need to be able to use them for. And we're not trying to go out and the animals weren't trying to break their bones on a daily basis. So they had as robust of bones as they needed to be able to survive. Did the large cats hunt alone or in groups? This is debated still. And I don't know if I want to sway one way or the other right now. Just I don't want to make anyone mad who did the research. But that one is still very debated, and there is still current research being produced. We were just at a conference at the beginning of November, the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, and there was new research even being produced then. So it's still something that's being working on right now.
And I know a fair amount of your work also thinks about or tries to model changing ecosystems, and the comparison between La Brea and McKittrick in terms of age and ecosystems as well. But so at La Brea, your study area, how old are the oldest fossils, and what can that most teach us about the ecosystems then as opposed to now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the oldest fossils found at La Brea, as of right now, we know are about 50, 55,000 years old. They're pretty recent compared to if you think of things like the dinosaurs or even, millions of years ago. They're pretty recent, but just because they're recent, we can still learn a lot about changing ecosystems from the La Brea tar pits. So during this time from 55,000 years ago up until now, we were going through periods of glaciation and then deglaciation. So warming and different cooling periods where there were buildup of ice and then all that melting of ice. And what we see in the fossils from La Brea is about 17,000 to 18,000 years ago. The fossils of dire wolves there and other carnivores had a lot of breakage in their teeth, which we don't really see at any other time periods in the La Brea tar pits. So what this has been hypothesized to be is that during this time of about 17,000 years ago, when we were going through the last glaciation, is that it was a really hard time for all of the carnivore, at least the carnivores there, and they were going out and eating food that they wouldn't normally be eating, probably food that was a lot harder and more abrasive than what they were eating. And because of that, they were breaking their teeth a lot more. And now we are able to see that in the fossil record. And that's one of the pits that these animals are found in, is one of the only ones where we see that maximum amount of breakage there.
Okay. Well, I'd like to invite all the speakers back to the Zoom room at this time. And it'd be great if the audience wants to post some additional questions in the chat. And thank you, Jack and Juan, for busily answering questions in the chat. And I did want to ask Juan, it's that your lab has so many, of course, so many different kinds of fossil fish that you study, and fish from different geological time periods. But what would you say, if you had to choose, is the most exciting research going on in your lab from the short time you had to highlight what you're working on?
Oh, it's a really good question, a really hard question as well, Lisa. I have been thinking about this since I joined UCMP and joined UC Berkeley. What do I do given such a deep, deep time fish has been evolved, so many fish material that worth to study, and so many interesting questions out there. So one of the things I want to share with everyone here is that to understand the past, we often need to use the tools of the modern time, particularly for paleontologists. We only have that much evidence. How do we find out what was the fossil doing back then? How did they perform such a function? How did they survive? What did they contribute to the ecosystem, and what do they mean for the evolution of all the organisms? So to tackle one of the questions, my lab, my previous students and myself have been developing functional models to estimate on the hearing capability of ancient animals. So this kind of methods, we use computational powers because head models doesn't work all the time, and also computational models give us higher power. So that research has been recently published, and we have applied to fossil organisms, which has generated exciting news or exciting results for how do we understand the past, because the past is the key to predict the future. We live in an ever-evolving Earth, and to know better is the way for us to keep everything together.
Absolutely. And I want to highlight one additional question in the chat that has to do with geological change, particularly along the coast. So you showed some terrific maps of California, and with coastal geological change and sea level change, do you expect to find fossils below current sea level? So say on the continental shelf, and do you see this all up and down the West Coast?
That's such a wonderful question. I only been living in California and joined Cal for about 4 years. I just feel like California geology and paleontology is a lifelong learning experience you can anticipate. One thing blew my mind when I first get on to prospecting is that one of the formation has tiny exposure in the middle of the sea. If we get a low tide, we might saw a tip, but we can just visually or virtually think there was a piece of land back then. There might be fossil embedded in those, and I bet to learn kayaking or other skills to go into the ocean, and one day might just use a scoop or fish net to getting some fossil out. I think one of the formation is the Monterey Formation. They do have a fossil fish within, so I'm excited for the future possibility of excavation in the bay or in the ocean.
Absolutely. And since I study microfossils and they count, as fossils, and we certainly find them offshore and in cores and bottom sample collections.
Oh, can I add one little thing here, Lisa? I'm sorry. So I didn't get too much detail about the Death Valley locality. Death Valley, the environment from the sediments and from the fossils, we can reconstruct it as actually near shore environment. It's marine, but it's probably close to like a very low salinity. So, turns out back then in the Paleozoic or very early Devonian, California was pretty much underneath the water and the seashore was way off. It's in the current Death Valley area.
Definitely. And maybe I'll ask Jack or really any of our speakers to answer the question about if species evolve more rapidly in California because the geography is so dynamic. So what would you say for terrestrial species, Jack or Emily, about rates of evolution of certain forms?
I think that's a great question. We know that animals living, terrestrial animals living in California today definitely exhibit, rapid evolution depending on the landscape they're in. There are, desert rodents that have evolved rapidly to have different fur colors because some are living over volcanic plains, whereas others are living in more typical brown rocks. But as far as the fossil record goes, I think small animals definitely evolve faster than larger animals. But at the same time, California again is at the crossroads of a lot of these intercontinental dispersals. So sometimes it's not so much animals locally evolving, but you're getting actually a whole influx of a lot of diversity, adding to what's occurring already there. So I guess that's a long answer for saying I'm not sure, and I think probably, but there's also a lot of intermixing of animals that coming from other continents that might even speed up or encourage rapid evolution because of the competition and also the new resources that they bring into the place we call California today.
Absolutely. Well, that was a great final question and answer. So thank you, Jack. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Emily. I'm going to hand the floor back over to Dean Harland and say to everyone, thank you. Go Bears. We love that all of you joined us tonight and appreciate your enthusiastic questions. So Dean Harland, it's all yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for moderating, and thanks to all our speakers for their compelling presentations. I see my background has turned white instead of looking at the sunset. Anyway, all of these talks are just terrific examples of the possibilities that come with basic science research. It sparks intellectual curiosity, and it sparks hope to think about the fantastic minds working on science questions, which for sure includes our students, faculty, and researchers. And of course, I have to ask, you should consider a gift in support of this great enterprise, this University of California Museum of Paleontology, the glue of our biological research enterprise. And I hope you'll join us next Tuesday, December the 3rd at 5 p.m. again for the next installment of Basic Science Lights the Way, where we'll from three scientists about how fluid mechanics and dynamics informs their work in earth science, mathematics, and engineering. Also, please reach out if you'd like to learn anything more about anything we covered today. We'll be sharing additional resources with you by email about today's topic and speakers. And a video of today's session will be available at the Basic Science Lights the Way website about 2 weeks from now. And you can always visit the website to watch some of the previous exciting episodes you missed. So thank you for attending and showing such interest in this topic. There was a record number of people who responded. We couldn't do your work without your interest, attention, and so until next time, stay curious. Fiat Lux, and go fossil hunting bears.